Hello, welcome to Casual Veteran Gamer. In the video today I'm going to be going through some of the fundamentals of magic and spellcasting. The reason I'm doing this is I had a commenter on one of my videos and I think they've been playing the game for a little while, but they'd never played Dungeons and Dragons before, and that was probably the main cause of their confusion, I think. And then kind of realised that there's no obvious explanation as to what's going on with all of the spellcasting. So I thought I'd make a video going over what I think are all the fundamentals, and that if you understand all of these, and you can make your own decisions about what spells are good, which ones work, which ones don't. If you feel like you know all the fundamentals, all the basics of spellcasting, this video really isn't for you. I don't need to waste your time watching it. If you're more interested in specific spells for specific classes, I've got videos I've made for I think all the classes and pretty much all the spells. You can find them on my channel. So the video is quite long, and I can't really apologise for that because it does take time to go through all the details of each little facet of spellcasting. But to help you guys out, there are timestamps in the description, so if you feel like you know all about spell slots, you can just go to the part of the video you want to go to. Alright, so for the first part, I'm going to go through some of the more important parts of character creation linked to your spellcasting. And I thought it would be a good place to start is with the ability scores, because depending on what class you choose, you should focus on a different ability score. Now this screen, if you know how to use it, and different ways to use it, is really useful. Because if you do hover over the different abilities, it tells you which abilities are important for which classes. And I will point out, if you, for example, pick Cleric, it does put a little star above the Wisdom, which is the main spellcasting modifier for Clerics. With Druid, it sticks to Wisdom. So even if you don't read these ability descriptions, the game does kind of try to help you to tell you which is the main ability for each different class. But I will go through all of them just to make sure it's all very clear. So starting with Clerics, you want Wisdom to be your highest ability if you want your spells to do better in general, but we'll get to that later. Druids are also Wisdom, and we also do all the Wisdom classes together, also Ranger. And we can see here from the description it says Druids, Rangers and Clerics. There are two more spellcasters currently. There will be more coming later on after early access or during early access. So Warlocks use Charisma, and interestingly, probably more interesting for those of you who haven't played Dungeons and Dragons before, and maybe haven't played any other Baldur's Gate games, this lets us know some of the other classes that are coming. And most of the remaining classes that use magic, not all of them, but most of them, actually have Charisma as their main spellcasting ability modifier. So we can see here we've got Bards, Paladins and Sorcerers also use their Charisma, but currently we've only got Warlocks. This video is being made during patch 4 of early access, and I've got no idea what's going to be coming up in the future. And then Wizards, the only class to use Intelligence, and the only class mentioned when we hover over the Intelligence ability. In the tabletop version there is a spellcasting class called Artificers, but they're not in the Player's Handbook, which is like the first book you would probably first book you would buy as a player. There are plenty of other books available, and in a couple of the more recent books there is a class called the Artificer, but it's not here, so I can't be certain that it will turn up. Now that's all well and good, me telling you, okay, these are the stats you need for each class, but the next thing we need to look at is why they're important and how they affect your spellcasting and your spells. So I'm sticking with the Wizard for now, and with this start in Intelligence, I would highly advise you put Intelligence as high as possible. When we come to the Abilities tab, you'll notice we get these little numbers between the name of the ability and the actual ability score, and these are known as the ability modifiers. So when I'm talking about your spellcasting ability modifier later in the video, this is the value that I am referring to. I'm going to go through all the values you can get for the ability scores at the moment. So starting, this is the same for every ability. It doesn't matter which ability you're using. So you have a -1 modifier starting at an ability score of 8. And essentially every even number, this bonus goes up by 1. So at 10, it's 0. At 12, it gets to +1. 14 is +2. 16, I can't get it there, but get intelligence once I give myself enough points. At 16, it's +2. Give myself some more points. There we are. +3, sorry. 16 is +3. 18 will be +4, and 20 would be +5. These modifiers are used differently depending on what spell you're using. But we'll get into how different spells, different types of spells, use this ability modifier. Okay, the next thing we're going to look at is how your spellcasting ability modifier actually interacts with different types of spells, because not every spell is affected in the same way. This also will be linked to just different types of spells in general. So first of all, I'm just going to go ahead and look through a few of these spells that I chose for the wizard. So I've got Shocking Grasp, Firebolt, Mage Hand, and Acid Splash. These 4 represent almost the 4 different types of spells that we can get. There are some other unique spells and things, but the first thing to look at is for each spell, if it has attack/save, and then what it says after that. So Shocking Grasp, attack/save, melee attack. Firebolt, attack/save, ranged attack. Mage Hand doesn't have that. And then this one here, attack/save, dexterity. So the 2 that say attack, so melee attack and ranged attack, the way your spellcasting ability modifier affects that is from the spell attack. This description does tell you where this +5 comes from. I'm not going to read it all out loud, but where this comes from is your proficiency bonus, which is here, +2, and that's directly affected by what level you are. At certain levels this goes up. The soonest it goes up is at level 5, which we can't currently get at the making of this video. So during early access currently, this is going to be stuck at +2. So the spell attack is determined by your proficiency bonus plus the intelligence ability modifier. Now the actual modifier isn't anywhere on this screen. It doesn't just tell you, look, 16 is +3. But one way you can kind of work out what your ability modifier is if you do click on the ability, and if you know there are certain skills you're not proficient in, so here, this wizard is not proficient in nature and investigation, that tells you your ability modifier. But it's not very difficult to remember. 10 is 0, 12 is +1, every 2 it goes up by +1. So when I want to cast, say, Firebolt, what happens is the game will roll a virtual 20-sided dice and then add the spell attack modifier to it, which will be +5. I'm just going to go find some imps and to show you that in a second. So I've come to the first combat of the game. It is the wizard's turn. So I'm going to use Firebolt. Attack/save is ranged attack. Really, this is an attack. There's no save here. They're just trying to save some space in the description box. So this is just an attack, a ranged attack. So it can target one of the enemies. Obviously this percentage chance to hit. This is determined by 2 things. One, the enemy's armor class, and secondly, our spellcasting attack modifier. So if I come and have a look at this in more detail. So attack roll 6, so the random number picked for me was 6. +2, which is the proficiency. Thankfully here it does actually tell us exactly where these numbers come from for the most part. So in brackets. And then the +3 is for my intelligence modifier. If my wizard only had an intelligence of 10, let's say, I'd only get a +2 bonus to that attack. And it's very important if you're going to be attacking any enemy creatures that you have a high score for your spellcasting ability modifier. Then the damage roll is 1d10. That comes from the description of the spell. Just beneath where it says Firebolt, Evocation Cantrip, it says 1d10 fire. Now imps are resistant to fire, so although I rolled a 9, if they're resistant to fire they take half the damage, which is -5. I know half of 9 is 4.5, but Basically, normally in Dungeons and Dragons, if you have a number that isn't an integer, the value gets rounded down. So instead of doing 4.5 damage, 4 damage gets done, 5 damage gets resisted. So that's with a ranged attack. And this is the same as using a bow in the sense that if you're close to a creature, you will have disadvantage on the attack if you're within 5 feet. And I'll try and show you that next. So I'm in a bit of trouble. One of the imps blew up one of the canisters here, taking like almost all my hit points. Right, so if I choose Firebolt again, you can see on the left side, it's only 90% chance to hit. It says target is too close and threatened. So if you're within, it should normally be within 5 feet of an enemy, you'll get this disadvantage on your attack. Which is where maybe I could use Shock and Grasp. Now, the reason I can use Shock and Grasp without this disadvantage on it is that it is a melee attack. There aren't a lot of spells that are melee attacks, but there are some, and this is one example. And so the same process happens here as with the ranged attack. Let's just have a look at that. So this time the number rolled for me was 16. I had advantage, so there were 2 d20s were rolled and the highest number was picked. +2, +3 for the intelligence modifier equals 21. That's my roll to hit. We're told that armor class is 7, so it's very likely I'm going to hit. And the damage roll was 8, 1d8. And imps aren't resistant to lightning damage, so took the full damage. I do want to point out one major difference between most spells and weapon attacks is that spells do not add the spellcasting ability modifier to the damage done, whereas weapon attacks do. So if you're using a finesse weapon, you've got +3 for your dexterity modifier, and you're using a rapier, which is 1d8, it'll do 1d8 +3 damage. Spells don't do that. Spells do just the damage in their description. So I've covered the 2 types of spells that have attack in their description. The next one I'm going to go for, this one says dexterity. What this means is that the enemies make a dexterity saving throw. And the number they have to beat with their saving throw comes from this attribute here, this property here called Spell DC. Now this does not tell you how it's worked out exactly. There isn't even, it just says your spellcasting ability modifier is added to this value. The way this number is really worked out is spell DC is equal to 8, just a value of 8, that's the value chosen by the designers of Dungeons and Dragons. 8 plus your proficiency bonus, which is going to be +2 in early access, plus your intelligence, well, your spellcasting ability modifier, intelligence for wizards. So 8 plus 2 is 10, plus another 3 is 13, which matches up with here. So what's going to happen when I cast Acid Splash? It happens to have an area of effect. It will actually affect both of these enemies. Oh, I've just gotten rid of it from the quick bar. You can see both the enemies are highlighted, both these imps are highlighted, and both of them are going to make a dexterity saving throw. Different spells will require enemies to make different types of saving throws. The most common saving throws are dexterity, constitution, and wisdom. That's not to say that other abilities are not used, but just the way the game's been designed, most spells affect either dexterity, wisdom, or constitution. I don't think I've got any other spells currently ready that... Oh yeah, this one is also dexterity, right? None of the other spells I've got prepared currently need the enemies to make a saving throw. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, just to show you what this happens. So what we saw there, quite nice to see actually, the imp towards the bottom of the screen passed its saving throw, the imp towards the top of the screen failed. So what we'll do here, try and look at what happened. So Acid Splash's DC is 13, that's set by the caster, set by you. The saving throw is the roll of a d20, a 20-sided die, and then they get to add their dexterity modifier. It happens, let's actually just examine the imp. It happens to be that imps have a dexterity of 8, so they get a -1 to their modifier, which makes them less likely to pass. But they just happen to roll quite high on their d20 roll. So 15 minus 1 is 14. 14 beats the 13. The imps are trying to get 13 or above. So if they get a total of 12 or below, they fail. 13 and above, they pass. Let's have a look at the next one. So the other imp rolled a 4, and then minus 1 because it's got the same stats as the other imp. So the total was 3, and then the game rolled the damage for me, rolled 1d6, a 6-sided die, and then happened to get a 2. There are quite a few spells that have saving throws. It's not just limited to one particular class or anything. And generally, in the game at the moment, I'm not going to talk about any particular spells, but in the game at the moment, spells that have an attack roll are generally more likely to work than those that have a saving throw. There are lots of ways to get advantage on attack rolls, but for saving throws, there aren't very many ways to increase the likelihood that the creature, the enemy, will fail the saving throw. If an enemy is prone, they automatically fail dexterity saving throws. That's probably the main way. But for example, for constitution or wisdom saving throws, there's no real way at the moment to decrease that. Sometimes it's good because if you're close to an enemy and you don't have a spell with a melee attack, a saving throw can actually, a spell that forces a saving throw can be very useful because you don't get any disadvantages for being close. But on the whole, you're going to have higher to hit chances on attack spells with attack rolls than success chances on spells that have saving throws. And then that leaves us with spells that don't have either this attack, melee attack or ranged attack, or just a saving throw. They just work. Now each of these spells is always a little bit different, but I've got Mage Hand here, which just creates the Mage Hand. I'm not going to go through all the details of it. This Long Strider just works, whoever a target is on. Same for Mage Armor. So not all spells require a throw of some sort. Normally the ones that don't are either buffing spells for you or your party, or maybe something like Fog Cloud, which is like controlling the battlefield. But you need to read each spell's description very carefully to find out whether they have an attack roll or saving throw, or they don't require one. And that leads to one other type of spell, which Mage Hand covers just lovely, is whether some spells require... It says concentration required. So I'm going to cast Mage Hand. It's not actually going to be very useful in this particular battle, but I just want to point it out. So the Mage Hand rolled initiative because we're in combat. The imps saw it. Right, it's just been rolled initiative to get into combat. And so we can see down on the portrait in the bottom left, there's a little circle. It's not necessarily easy to see from a distance, but if you put your cursor over it, it tells you what this is. So this tells me this wizard, this character, is concentrating on Mage Hand. What the concentration mechanic is a way for the designers to try and make sure that you don't have all your spells going at once. That's pretty much what it comes down to. The important part is you can only concentrate on one spell at a time. So I've got Mage Hand out here. I've also got Fog Cloud. So on the next turn, I'll show you what happens on the next turn. So when I try to cast Fog Clouds, it will work. There's no attack roll or anything. But you'll notice that the Mage Hand disappears. So if I just put Fog Cloud, I don't know, just put it here. There goes the Mage Hand. So if you're already concentrating on a spell, and you cast another concentration spell, the first spell that you were concentrating on stops happening. So you need to be very careful about what spells you choose to cast, because you cannot cast two concentration spells at once. There is one other way to lose concentration, and that's if you are hit. Right, so perfect. Alright, saving throw passed. So what happened is the imp tried to hit Tav, hit Tav. And then it doesn't have it, unfortunately, annoyingly, it doesn't have the information in this box here. It's just got the spell that the imp chose to cast, and how much damage it did. So you kind of just have to believe me on the next little bit. But a saving throw was made, and the saving throw is to try and maintain, keep concentration on the spell. Now it's possible to fail that. And the way that works is your character your character makes a Constitution saving throw. Now the number that needs to be beaten is calculated in one of two ways. Well, it's calculated in one way. Is the DC is equal to half the damage taken, or if that number is lower than 10, then the target is 10. So 10 is the minimum target. I'm taking that from the tabletop rules of Dungeons and Dragons. As I said, it's not here. I can't really prove that to you from what's in the game at the moment. We just got to take that as that it is the same as the tabletop version. I think what I'll try and do is once I've killed the imp, I will get my wizards to cast a concentration spell and continuously hit them until they lose concentration. Alright, let's try and kill the imp. No need, because this is one way to lose concentration. is Tav lost concentration on Tav. If you're knocked unconscious, you also lose concentration. Just automatically, there's no way to save that, stop that from happening. Right, let's go resurrect Tav. Thankfully, we're next to the restoration pod, whatever you call this. So Tav can get back up. And notice that the spell, the fog cloud that was there before, isn't there anymore. I'm just going to use Magic Missile. Magic Missile is one of the very few attacking spells that doesn't require an attack roll or saving throw. It automatically hits, and that's the complete positive thing about Magic Missile. It hits. I'm not going to go over many spells. Right. So what I'm going to do, we'll get close to the restoration pod in case things go badly. So Tav's concentrating on Fog Cloud. We'll get Lae'zel to keep using Knockout. Ah, right, there we are. So again, we can't see this happening in the information box. But the point is, Tav got hit, and even though the damage was very low, just being hit has a chance to break your concentration, and it happened here. So what this means is the wizards, although we can't see the roll, must have rolled lower than a 10 from the roll plus the Constitution modifier. And this is one reason why you want your spellcasters to have not a bad Constitution anyway. Which means I must have rolled less than an 8 on the d20, on the 20-sided die. There's nothing here to show what's just happened with the target for the Constitution saving throw, but it means you got less than 10. And the spell was gone, and the spell slot was used. Spells use up actions and bonus actions just like weapon attacks do. For the most part, most spells use an action to cast. There are only a few spells that use a bonus action, and to be honest, most of the spells that do use a bonus action are often something to do with movement. So Misty Step here teleports me to a certain location. Expeditious Retreat allows me to take dash as a bonus action. That will be in a future turn. Any others? Featherfall, again, to do with movement, grants immunity to falling damage. Pretty much all spells that do damage are actions. And I think that's to try and stop you from using two sets of damaging spells at once. Now, in Baldur's Gate 3, it's one difference between Baldur's Gate 3 and the tabletop version, is you can use a leveled spell for your bonus action, so maybe I want to come to here, and also use a leveled spell for your action. Also want to point out, something I haven't shown up until now really, is for leveled spells, when you click on a spell, you'll get this other box turning up, and it's whether you want to use a level 1 spell slot or a level 2 spell slot. For most spells, as you use higher spell slots, the effects of them become greater, but it's actually not true for all spells. The reason you might want to have that option though is maybe you don't have any level 1 spell slots left. Anyway, you want to cast a spell desperately, so you've got to use a level 2 spell slot. Anyway, this wizard is going to use Thunder Wave at level 2. And I use my bonus action there. Okay, I just mentioned the term spell slot, which I haven't used so far in this video. And it says casting spells requires available spell slots. That's not strictly true. They haven't put a full description here. Because if you have a cantrip, you can cast as many of those as you like. It doesn't require any sort of resource. You're just free to do it until you get bored, basically. Right, I'm out of combat, so I'm just spamming all different spells just to try and show you. Right, I can that one, cast as many cantrips as I want. So I've been using Mage Hand, Acid Splash, Firebolt, and just an infinite number. It's a bit like having a weapon in your hand. If I come to the spellbook screen, it actually differentiates the spells into different levels. So cantrips, you can kind of think of cantrips as being level 0. They don't use any resources. Right now this is a level 1 wizard and only has 2 level 1 spell slots. So if I want to cast any of these spells in this little section under level 1, it uses up something called a spell slot. It uses up a resource. What this is called doesn't really matter. If in your head you can treat it like, I don't know, mana points. And every spell slot, every spell at level 1 uses up a single level 1 mana point. You know, the actual nomenclature doesn't really matter. Alright, so let's see what happens. Right, let's say I want to cast Mage Armor. Doesn't require concentration, doesn't require any sort of roll, just increases armor class by 3. Awesome. Then let's say, okay, I want to move faster, I'm going to cast Longstrider on myself. And at level 1, I've used up both spell slots, that's it. So you'll see all the level 1 spells, they are darkened, and I can't cast another one until it says recharge, long rest. Now at this point I kind of have to start looking at each type of spellcaster individually to show you some of the differences. Up until this point, it doesn't matter what class you've used or you are using. Everything I've said applies to all of the classes. This restoration station, this is the equivalent of a long rest. So when it says recharge on long rest, it means you get these 2 spell slots back. They're level 1, and there's a little Roman numeral of 1 telling us we've got 4 level 1 spell slots. So let's cast the same things again. Maybe I'm going to be nice to Lae'zel and give her Longstrider instead. Up here, I'm sure you all know we've got the short rest button. Click on short rest, we don't get the ability to cast level 1 spells again. Doesn't matter how many we take, but with the long rest, we do. Now, spell slots recharge on the long rest for all magic classes except, there's one exception, which are warlocks. They get their spell slots back on a short rest. But you'll also find they don't get as many spell slots in total. So perhaps I should change to a warlock now, just to show you the difference. So I've gone and respec'd the character, which means I can actually change the class using a cheat engine. This isn't something you can normally do. So this is a warlock, and it has 1 level 1 spell slot, and you can see here, recharge, take a short rest. This is the only class that can do this, and has this ability. So if I cast Armor of Agathis, alright, it gets cast. And if I click on the short rest button, I get the spell slot back, and I can cast another level 1 spell. Warlocks also get cantrips as well, just like most other spellcasting classes. Not every single class does get cantrips, but most do. Right, so the next, I think, natural and obvious question is, alright, so how can I get more spell slots? To do this, you need to level up. As far as I'm aware, there's no table or information anywhere in the game telling you how many spell slots you'll get at each level. And this can be very different for different classes, actually. So I'll show you the Warlock. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to use a cheat engine to give myself experience. Boom, there we go. I can level up. It's not to say, I'm going to just ignore everything, I just want to accept. It's not to say for every class that you get a new spell slot every level. So for a Warlock at level 2, we do get 2 spell slots. But when we go to level 3, we've still got 2. And when we go to level 4, we've still got 2 spell slots. So Warlocks, over the progression of the game, they will not have a lot of spell slots. But the benefit for them is they can replenish them on a short rest. However, as it currently stands, it's not really much more difficult to take a long rest compared to a short rest. I'm going to show you a few more of the classes just to show you the differences between how many spell slots we get. Respecking, right, I can change the class. So most spellcasting classes, you can divide them into mostly 3 different types plus Warlock. We've got full casters, as they're described in the, as most people describe them in Dungeons & Dragons Tabletop Edition. Of the options we've got for classes at the moment would be Cleric and Wizard. So let's go back to the Wizard. I think I will be able to level up. Yeah, so at level 1, we get 2 level 1 spell slots. Let's just accept that. At level 2, we've now got 3 level 1 spell slots. At level 3, we get an extra level 1 spell slot and 2 level 2 spell slots. And then at level 4, this goes up to 3 level 2 spell slots. So for the most part, Wizards and Clerics, and what will be Bards and Sorcerers, I think that's it from the top of my head, they'll get more spell slots than everyone else. Their main thing is casting spells. There are some certain subclasses can make them good in melee and do other things, but they are basically classed as a full caster and get kind of the maximum possible number of spell slots from the game. Right, let's go back and change this to another different class just to show you some differences in spell slots. Oh, Druid also a full caster. Sorry, completely forgot that. Right, from our options, the Ranger is what we could describe as a half caster. Paladins would come under this as well. And just double checking for all the classes to make sure I don't forget any this time. Artificers would count as a half caster if they were in the game, but I'm not sure they will be. So let's make myself a Ranger. So actually at level 1, there are no spells for a Ranger. At level 2 we get 2 level 1 spell slots, which seems good, right? At level 3 we get 3 level 1 spell slots, but this is where we start to see quite a big difference. At level 4 we've still only got 3 level 1 spell slots, whereas a Wizard, a Cleric, a Druid, a Sorcerer, Bard, they will all have 4 level 1 spell slots and 3 level 2 spell slots. So by the time, the maximum level in the tabletop version is 20, as far as I'm aware, Baldur's Gate 3 won't get up to that. But by the time we get to level 20, Wizards or the full casters could cast level 9 spells, but these half casters, the maximum spell level they'll ever get to is level 5. And then that leaves the kind of 1/3 casters, which we do actually come across. These are specific subclasses. So fighters don't normally get spell slots, they don't normally get spells. But when we get to choose our subclass, we can pick Eldritch Knight. The same will go for Arcane Trickster. So at level 3, they've only got 2 level 1 spell slots. If we increase this to level 4, they've got 3 level 1 spell slots, which I will admit looks the same as the Ranger and what will be the Paladin. So we don't really see a difference in these first few levels. But I'm now opening the book for the player's handbook. I'm going to find the Eldritch Knight. So, for what we'll find is that the Eldritch Knight will have 3 level 1 spell slots for level 5 and for level 6. And only at level 7 do they finally get 4 level 1 spell slots and 2 level 2. Whereas a Ranger, at level 5, a Ranger will get 4 level 1 spell slots and 2 level 2 spell slots. So different classes have different number of spells they can cast within a long rest, with Warlocks being kind of a separate case, and they can recharge their spells on a short rest. All of that isn't in the game. The only way you can find that out is if you go and search that on the internet, or if you've got the player's handbook or an electronic version of the book, you can go and check on various different websites. Otherwise, you just have to use what you're given. Now, the spell slots isn't the only difference between the specific classes. We also have how spells are prepared. So, depending on your class, you get different choices of spells to pick for different level spells. So a wizard gets to pick 3 cantrips at level 1. As they level up, they'll be able to choose extra cantrips. And we'll notice here for a wizard it says cantrips, spells, and prepared spells. So the spells bit here are the possible spells that you know. No, for a wizard it's more like the possible spells that are inside your spellbook. And once you've made this decision, you can't remove a spell that's in your spellbook currently, I don't think. And wizards, very specifically wizards, can add extra spells to the spellbook by copying from scrolls. That's a special feature for wizards. None of the other spellcasting classes get that. But a wizard can't keep all the spells in their mind at once. So they've got this spellbook full of spells, and then they can remember a certain number of spells to be able to cast during combat. Or it doesn't have to be in combat, but they can remember a certain number of spells at any one time. Now, this 4, where does this come from? So these numbers, some of them are based purely on the class and the level of the class. Like cantrips, all wizards get 3 cantrips at the beginning, and that's that. In terms of number of spells known, as part of their class kit, they start with 6 level 1 spells. That's it, that's just the way things are. Now, the prepared spells, this value of 4, this comes from a combination of their level, wizard level, and their intelligence modifier. Which is why this is 4, because the level is 1. The abilities at 16, actually if I change that to, let's say, 10, when we come to class, they can only prepare 1 spell, because they're level 1, and their intelligence modifier is 0. Not every class prepares spells in this way, which is why I'm going to have to spend a little bit of time going over each class, but lots of them are fairly similar anyway. So let's go back to abilities, and let's just make this 16. And then we've got these 4 spells here. Alright. So as wizards level up, you can see the number of prepared spells goes up by 1 because the level has gone up by 1. And also, every single level for wizards in particular, they can add 2 more spells to their spellbook. Let's just pick that. So as I go to level 3, I would expect the number of prepared spells to go to 6. Which it was there, so it was a bit quick. Level 4 should be 7. However, if I change intelligence to +2, so that's made intelligence 18, the modifier is +4. It doesn't show it here, so I'm just going to accept this. See, it says 7. Press accept. Come back to here. Now it's 8. So in the level up screen, it doesn't take into account any modifiers you might have from having an intelligence of 18. So do keep that in mind, and then they can prepare an extra spell. So anytime outside of combat, if there are any classes that kind of have to prepare spells, you can pick and choose, right? Whatever you want to have. So that's wizards, but wizards are fairly unique with their spellbook. If I go and change and respec this character, I'll turn them into a cleric. Clerics and druids work very much in the same way. So they get different numbers of cantrips each, which are based upon their class and what the designers chose. Prepared spells, this again comes from a level, and I can't get my wisdom up to a 14 because I'm just a high elf. And this screen doesn't actually let me change my race. Right? Let's come back to class. So the number of prepared spells is from the class and the wisdom modifier. But you'll notice there aren't any just known spells. So when I go to venture forth, go and have a look. The way both clerics and druids work is at all points they have access, potentially have access to prepare any of the spells from their list. And I haven't really mentioned lists yet, but basically different classes have a different spell list, which is completely defined by the creators of the game, the designers of the game. There's no list here for us in the game, but suffice to say, these are the cleric spells. Oh, sorry, this is a druid. These are the druid spells. And let's just level up. Right. Prepared spells. This has gone up by 1, which I would expect because I've gone up a level. And when we get to level 2, all of a sudden, not level 2, at level 3, we've got all these spells. Right. This is what happens with clerics also. When we get to a level that allows us to cast level 2 spells, we get access to all of them. We don't need to pick and choose them. All we do need to pick and choose is what spells we have prepared. And just like a wizard, outside of combat, I can change it to whatever I want. It doesn't matter. Also going to show you ranges, because they are different. Ranges are similar to warlocks, in the sense that you pick what spells your character always knows. You don't get to choose unless you're essentially at the level up screen. So, Rangers. This is chosen 2 out of 2. Rangers and Warlocks. And this will also apply to Bards and Sorcerers when we get to them. They only know a limited number of spells. You have to choose spells every time you level up. Maybe not every time, but at certain levels you get to choose spells. So I say Hunter's Mark and Cure Wounds. And in the spellbook for the Ranger now, that's all I've got. This Find Familiar comes from the one of the Ranger abilities. It's not actually a spell per se. And that's it. I can't change these out if I click on them. I've just always got them prepared. But I can't unprepare them. I can't swap them out unless I level up. 2 things happen when you level up. Normally you get an extra spell you can choose. Maybe one Longstrider. And for Rangers and Warlocks, we can, let's say I don't want Cure Wounds, you can swap it out for another spell. The reason for this is as you level up, you get access to new levels of spells. Now for a Ranger that doesn't happen. And here, for a level 4, basically any spell, it seems like any level we don't get a new spell slot at. For a Ranger, we don't get to swap our spells. But I'll quickly show you with the Warlock. Well, not the, but a Warlock. Change the class to Warlock. Here we go. So 2 spells known. Don't need to prepare them, I just know these spells. And that's one way players normally talk about the differences between different spellcasters, like prepared casters, or they have known spells, prepared spells and known spells. And as we level up, I can choose a new spell. Hex is actually a good choice. And I can replace a spell. Maybe I don't want Arms of Hadar, and I want Expeditious Retreat instead. But Warlocks, being, they're not exactly, well, they're kind of like a full caster. They get to replace spells at every level. One reason for this is currently these are all level 1 spells, but maybe I want to have a mirror image, and basically I can get access to more of the high level spells as you level up. So you don't just have a choice of 1 level 2 spell, you can have a choice of, let's say, 2. And again, as we level up, okay, Warlocks happen to get a new cantrip at this level. I can pick another level 2. I don't have to pick a level 2 spell, it could be level 1, but maybe I want Scorching Ray. And I want to replace Armor of Agathis with Shatter. And so now, for this particular Warlock, you can see I've got 5... Well, things with a Warlock. All their spells are always cast at maximum spell level. So they are a little bit different. So earlier in the game, there was... when the Warlock was a lower level, the Roman numeral was 1. This has now gone up to 2. So every time you cast a spell now with a Warlock, it's cast at level 2. apart from cantrips. Cantrips are still cantrips. The damage of cantrips will go up when we get to level 5, but we can't get to level 5 at the moment. And level 11 and level 17, I think it is. But any leveled spells, for a warlock only, will always be cast at maximum level. That's what makes warlocks different to the other spellcasters. One other thing on the descriptions for spells is the spell school that it belongs to. So Shock and Grasp is Evocation, so is Firebolt. Mage Hand is Conjuration. Ray of Frost is Evocation. Grease is Conjuration, and so on. Right? Each different spell has a different school it belongs to. And for the most part, this doesn't make much of a difference, apart from for a few, basically wizards. Apart from wizards and a little bit for Eldritch Knights and Arcane Tricksters, the school of the spells doesn't matter too much. The reason it matters for wizards is when they get to level 2, they pick a different school. There are only 2 subclasses at the moment. Wizards in the tabletop version do have a subclass for every single school available, and there are other subclasses available as well. And usually these different schools get a bonus if your wizard casts spells from that school. So for Evocation school, Evocation spells, blah 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 blah, those who specialise in the school are known as evokers. It doesn't really tell us what the bonus are. It's down here, sculpt spells. So an Evocation wizard can cast spells without worrying about harming their allies. And someone from the Abjuration school, if they cast an Abjuration spell, they gain a shield which has effectively some hit points, which can absorb some damage. The reason this can affect Arcane Tricksters and Eldritch Knights is if we go to class, let's pick Fighter. It doesn't really tell us this in the game, but this has all come from the tabletop version. If we pick Eldritch Knight, you'll notice here we actually get 2 different choices of spells. So we get cantrips, which are the wizard cantrips. Whatever, it doesn't really matter. And here it says spells 2 out of 2, spells 1 out of 1. It really doesn't explain what's going on. But if you look through all these spells, basically Eldritch Knights get a choice of 2 spells from either the Evocation or Abjuration schools. So all these spells here are either Evocation or Abjuration. And then they get the choice of 1 other spell from any school. So for Eldritch Knights it makes a bit of a difference. They get more choice from Evocation and Abjuration. They still get a choice from the rest. And I'll quickly show you Arcane Trickster as well. It's a similar sort of situation, except just the schools of magic chosen are different. So Rogue. Just want to point out also, for fighters and rogues, their spellcasting ability modifier is intelligence, just like a wizard. So I'm going to try and max that out as best I can. I won't be able to get... there we are, 16, it's fine. So let's just level up to level 3, let's get to Arcane Trickster. So Arcane Tricksters get access to a special type of Mage Hand, 2 cantrips from the Wizards school. And so here, it's 2 out of 2, 1 out of 1 again. It doesn't really explain what's going on at all. Yeah, this doesn't say it here anywhere. But they get more choice from the Enchantment and Illusion schools of magic, which I will have to say that the number of spells in the game is not as high as the number of spells that are in the tabletop version. There are more Illusion and Enchantment spells at level 1 in the tabletop version, but these are just our choices right now. And just like the Eldritch Knight, they get 1 free choice from any spell school. And Frost Life. So for the most part, spell schools don't make much of a difference. But those that you are wizards and kind of subclasses of other classes that are similar to wizards, basically they've got the same choice of spells as wizards, and use intelligence as the modifier. The spell schools only make a difference for that class, wizard, and subclasses as well. For a ranger, the school of the spell makes like no difference whatsoever, really. The last thing to really talk about are other sources of magic, like spells, apart from the class. classes cover most sources of magic, but we do have certain races get certain spells at different levels, and also you can have magic items, have spells inside them. So in terms of races that get spells at different levels, we get tieflings. Some of them are cantrips, for example, at level 1. Tieflings get thaumaturgy, and depending on the sub-race of tiefling, you might get mage hand instead. Drow do get they get dancing lights, although it isn't here for some reason. So Githyanki get mage hand at level 1, and they also get jump at level 3. And that's it from the races we can choose at the moment. So let's just show you Drow. Right, what are we going to choose? No, don't want to use Drow actually. I'm going to go to... No, yes, stay with Drow, whatever. Let's just leave it like this to see what happens.
Tell me.
Right, again, I'm going to cheat as I level up. This is something not told to us on the character creation screen, like I said. Here we've got dancing lights. This cantrip comes from being a drow. It's not because this character is a cleric. One thing to kind of just take into account, you can't always take this into account, but perhaps who you put different magic items on. Now it says here, dancing lights, casting ability, charisma. Now dancing lights doesn't really need a casting ability because it doesn't get applied to anything like anyone else. So it's a bit redundant to have the fact that casting ability is charisma. But let's level up this drow. Let's give her lots of experience. Boom, there we go. At level 2, there's nothing for being a drow, but at level 3, it doesn't show it here properly yet. Because see here, race, lost, sworn, drown. It looks like there's supposed to be something. There is something, it just doesn't show it. So they get Fairy Fire, and the casting ability is Charisma. This particular character is a cleric, so their spell casting ability modifier is Wisdom, but their racial spell casting ability modifier is Charisma. And there's no way to change that. The Charisma is because of their race. Drow get a bonus to Charisma, which is where most of the casting modifiers come from for the racial spells. Alright. So if you create a... look at that, there's a little step there or something. If you create a cleric or druid or wizard for your drow, you might not have a very high casting ability modifier for your racial spell. And as I said, there's nothing you can really do about it. Also, different items, like there's the headband that has Scorching Ray. And I believe that the casting ability modifier for that is Intelligence. So you probably don't want to be putting that on your fighter, because the chance to hit might not be very high. There's no necessarily wrong choice, there's probably some worse choice than others. Give it to whoever you want, but just bear in mind your chance to hit with these Scorching Rays is going to be lower than if you put it on, let's say, a wizard who has a high intelligence, or any other character who's got high intelligence. But that's all down to the individual magic item and the individual races. I'm not going to go over all of them, because it just takes up a bit too much time. This video is already long enough, I believe. And that kind of does bring me to the end of the fundamentals to magic and spellcasting. First of all, let me know if you think I've missed anything, because there's a very good chance that's happened by accident. Let me know if you've got any questions, if you think I've got anything wrong, though I do believe most of what I've said is correct. And let me know if you want me to do any more of these kind of fundamentals guides. If you want more information on particular spells, which spells are better than others, because there are some good choices and bad choices for spells for every class, then go and watch my other videos. I've been making them for quite a while. In fact, I've stopped making spell videos because I've run out of spells to go and review at this point for patch 4. But do go and check them out if you want to learn about spells for a particular class. I've got longer videos about like level 1 wizard spells or cantrips for wizards, and I've also got shorts videos for each individual spell if you want a very brief overview. Hopefully you've learned something, hopefully you've enjoyed it, and hopefully I will see you in the next one.